What would that mean? How can a restriction be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society? Well, judges for the past 28 years have gone fat on that one, and so will our lawyers. Roughly what it comes down to is this. Obviously, no restriction can be justified in a free society. But in a democratic society, well, let's see. So what the courts have decided was that if the parliament, if a legislative body, a parliament, provincial parliament, or federal parliament, passes a restriction that infringes on freedom of speech, provided they do it for a good reason, and provided they don't go too far, and provided the restriction has something to do with achieving the good goal, it's all right. So we have, I'll come back to that a little later, but so yeah, we have these rights as long as they're not inconvenient to anybody. I have followed the attacks on freedom of speech, both legally and what I would call quasi-legal. The quasi-legal or guerrilla warfare is what is being fought this past week. I'd like to make a couple of comments about the guerrilla warfare, because I think there are lessons to be learned from that apply to the other. Okay, meetings are regularly canceled. So we're faced with a problem. Our approach is a little different from American Renaissance, is we very seldom advertise a meeting publicly. We will advertise it to a select list of people. And it's a constant battle to keep the no-goods off the list. Therefore, we don't have to fight a battle because only a relatively small core of people know the meetings are happening. There are exceptions. In some places, some cities are safe, some rural areas are safe. So we will freely advertise free speech meetings in rural Alberta, rural British Columbia, and some small cities, because the enemy is not very strong there, so that we're not likely to face cancellation. That's one tactic we've used. But what we have found out is that most businesses can be summarized in the terms that Mr. March did. I take it to have a very high opinion of the business establishment. I used to be a rabid free enterpriser and libertarian and randomist, I'm not ashamed to say. I've grown less and less in love with the business establishment, and I would certainly be much less charitable than Jared Taylor in understanding the activities of hotels. As far as I'm concerned, no pity for hotel managers. They stood to make a good buck from you folks. Nice rooms, lots of money spent on food and drink. And in an economic downturn, they stood to do very well. For whatever reason, they chose to throw that away. Nobody asked them to risk their lives, as our forefathers in both countries did, to secure the liberties we had. Nobody asked them to go on a suicide mission. They were asked only to honor a contract. They didn't. As far as I'm concerned, they're the enemy. And we make harsh views on that. I'm not very charitable to people who take away my rights. So here's the 1-2 that normally happens. If the enemy finds out about a meeting, usually what will happen is they'll be called to the hotel with various tall tales. It's the Nazis, it's the Klan, and we even had a Human Rights Commission in Alberta do this. This group has attracted violence in the past. Well, that was only true on one occasion, and that was when communists tried to break up the meeting of the particular group I have in mind, Von Gossick's Canadian League of Rights, and they were talking about really hardcore, vicious topics, constitutional change for Canada. You know, every attendee had to be issued with 2 toothpicks to keep their eyes open. I'm not launching the topic, but I mean, talk about not exactly controversial. But you know, they were considered to be right of center, go after them. So that's the first line of attack. They hold up with a lot of tall tales, vaguely hinting at violence. Now, if the hotel owner still shows resolve, then the next tactic is they send the goons for a protest. That usually will scare them. So although we may prevail this time, next time the hotel owner will say, well, there were these people outside, and yeah, but we weren't those people. Yes, but you attract these people, so we can't do business with you anymore. We had that tactic played out some years ago several times in Edmonton, Alberta, and various hotels canceled meetings. It was sort of the type of situation you faced this past week until we ran into an Iranian engineer. And he was a hotel owner part-time, and we told him our story tale, and he said, well, you're welcome here. So we got some heavy-breathing phone calls. He even got a call from the RCMP, which may help explain my low opinion of police. It would be better, Mr. Iranian fellow, if you'd cancel that meeting. Why, he said. I have a contract with these boys. Well, they could attract violence. He said, but it's your job to keep those people away. What do we pay you for? Just to have Tim Hortons donuts and coffee? That cop would never be spoken to like that. And he said, furthermore, if you don't do your job, I'll be in my parking lot with a baseball bat, and I'll fix those people, because nobody's going to invade my hotel. Oh, sir, if you do that, we may have to arrest you. He said, go ahead. Now, I'm afraid to say, that degree of courage came from an Iranian, not one of our own. And that guy hung tough for 10 years. That hotel was used by all sorts of right-wing groups, Doug Christie's Western Severance Movement, my meetings, Ron Gossick's meetings, and various others, and there was no further problem. The Reds knew there was no point calling and threatening, telling him it was a Klan or whatever, that he didn't care. He was going to honor his contract, and there was peace. All it really takes, in my opinion, is a little bit of resolve. Well, that's the general tactic. Pulling up with a lot of heavy-breathing tales about how bad these people are. If that doesn't work, suggest violence. If that doesn't work, show up with a bunch of thugs who most of the time don't get in. Occasionally, we have actually had fisticuffs with people trying to break into the meeting, but most of the time, they look like that pathetic gang of drugged-out losers that showed up 2 years ago, just halfway down the block. I mean, they really weren't much of a menace, and if the local police can't take care of them, well, they ought to hand in their guns and their badges. But they did take care of them. So that's one form of attack. Another form of attack, and I think perhaps that is what happened this time to some extent, it is persistence. And again, I come back to my very low opinion of the business establishment. I mean, they may be no better than the rank and file, but they're certainly not to be in any way honored or looked up to. I'll tell the story of my own filing because I think it illustrates the point. I have been an activist for many, many years on two basic issues. That was immigration reform and freedom of speech. I was always very careful not to use the classroom as a platform. I didn't hand out literature in the halls. I didn't organize a little